Thank you very much, John, for your report. We took a picture of the whole 6-member delegation from the Library of Congress so that Sandra can show it to Jim as physical evidence that all 6 of them were present at the summit and did not go shopping. Talking about books and competition, I wanted to share with my American friends that for the last 3 years, I've been the co-chair of a jury of an annual book prize given by the Asia Society in New York. Yeah, a wealthy American called Bernard Schwartz has endowed a Bernard Schwartz Book Prize. And each year, the members of the jury, which is international, includes good friends in Thailand, India, Indonesia, we would launch ourselves into a very intensive orgy of reading. Yeah, with each passing year becoming impossible. This is the 3rd year, and we receive nominations from publishers. 120 books were submitted for the competition. The books have to be published in the year before. They have to be about Asia or about Asia-American relations, and they must contain either new insights or implications for policy. So we began this journey this year with 120 books. We succeeded in reducing that number in a teleconference a week ago to 5. And now the members of the jury are intensively rereading these 5 books. And next month, when we meet again by teleconference, we will reduce that to 1. For the second panel, which is on the future of the book, we wanted to choose a moderator who's young. Someone who's young enough to welcome technology, not afraid of the digital revolution. Someone who is comfortable with the book in the printed form, but also comfortable with book in its digital form. We wanted to find someone who is both a distinguished bureaucrat, but also a published author. And I think we found the right man. I want to introduce you Paul Tan, who is the director of the Writers' Festival of Singapore. He's also a published poet. Paul, please.
Thanks, Professor Koh, for your very kind words, and always for being a stalwart supporter of the Singapore Writers' Festival and all things to do with literature and the written word. My name is Paul. Thanks to the National Library Board for inviting me to be the moderator and for giving me this choice slot just after lunch. But I'm sure, together with our panelists, our very esteemed panelists, we will keep everybody very much engaged and with lots of questions to ask. This is what we're going to do. I'm going to invite all 4 of them to come on stage, and each of them will give a short presentation. After that, we will do a Q&A. So without further ado, can I invite our 4 panelists to just come up and take their seats first. First and foremost, John van Oudenaren, Ken Wissoker, Stephen Cole, and Max Phua. I'll give a detailed bio as they do their individual presentations. How about a round of applause for them? Yeah. Okay, it's a panel of esteemed gentlemen. Where are the ladies? Yeah. Well, this panel is going to look at the future of the book, and I think the description, in the program booklet bears a repeat reminder, because it was partly written by me. The proliferation of smartphones, tablets, and e-book readers have forced the printed page to jostle with the kaleidoscope of other entertainment sources available on the go. Increasingly, authors and publishers are leveraging on new technology to engage readers. So this panel is going to ask, will technology eventually change the form of the book? And will the book find its place, largely unaltered in our increasingly tech-savvy world? How has technology changed the experience of browsing and choosing books, and what long-term impact would this have for book retailers and libraries? So quite a lot of questions. I look forward to an hour of very interesting insights. And we have curated a panel, of course, of esteemed librarians, publishers, and retailers as well. So to help get the crystal ball gazing off, I'll invite Dr. John van Oudenaren, I hope I get his surname right, to give us the first presentation. I'll quickly introduce you. John directs the World Digital Library at the Library of Congress. Previously, he served as chief of the European Division at the Library of Congress and was the director of the library's Global Gateway Digital Library projects. As an author, he has published several books and numerous articles on European politics, US foreign policy, and international relations, and has taught at the Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies, Georgetown University, and the University of California at Los Angeles. This is the truncated version. The full version, of course, is in your program booklet. John, please.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you to the National Library Board for inviting me to this conference. It's a real honor to be here and to continue the tradition that began in Washington. Our panel is the future of the book, and our panel topic, and I'll pick up a bit from where we left off this morning. I think this morning's panel did an excellent job in looking at the importance of the book in human history, both as Professor Dura put it, the functional and the symbolic aspects of the book, with seemed to me a heavy emphasis on the symbolic side. When you listen to Dr. Sarah Galdin talk about the importance of the book in the Islamic world, or the other presentation about the importance of the book in China, it was a very rich treatment of the symbolic side of the importance of the book, although the functional side, to use that vocabulary, was not neglected either. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more about a narrower topic, which is more the codex, really. Give a brief overview of that, because that's basically what we're talking about. I mean, when the proverbial person in the street talks about the future of the book, the question is, they're thinking of this bound collection of pages, and at what point do people as individuals shift over from old-fashioned books to electronic books? And of course, the question we have here in front of us is, well, there really seem to be two crucial questions. One is, will paper books survive in some form? And secondly, if they don't survive, or if ebooks take over completely, how will they change? And will they change to such an extent that what we now know of as a book, or referred to as a book in the symbolic sense, is no longer a book? So that seems to be the key question that we need to look at, and I'll do a little bit of a historical survey to set the stage for that. The other thing I'd like to do, and I hadn't really planned on this until I heard the presentations this morning, was to talk a little bit about, from the perspective of an internet practitioner. I sort of do the internet, all day long. I haven't really thought about it consciously till this morning, but I that's what I do, and I've been basically doing that for 10 years now. I think I can maybe throw in some points about that, and particularly about the difference between ebooks and just electronic technology, HTML pages in particular. So with that, let me say a little bit about the past of the book as it relates to the future of the book. Now, as was stressed this morning, books can be traced back thousands of years. There were scrolls, there were tablets, and there were scrolls, papyrus, and so on. But when we talk about the codex, the bound collection of pages, we're really talking about, from the 3rd or 4th century of CE, late antiquity, right on up to today, or the late 20th century, really. This is the dominant way of reading books. And of course, again, the question for the future is, at what point do ebooks become so prominent, so prevalent, and that they completely supplant the codex? And if they do, and if so, what does that mean for how they change in conjunction with all the other electronic devices and methods and so on that are out there? Now, the codex, in turn, the codex era, which is lasts some 1,500 years or more, in turn also can be divided really into two subparts. We have the earlier part, which is basically the manuscript tradition, when there is no printing, or printing is being gradually introduced, as we heard in China, in the West a little bit later. There's block printing, there are block books and so on. It's not exactly the neat process of along comes Gutenberg and then we go from manuscript to print, but basically, for heuristic purposes, you can divide this, the codex era, if you will, into two parts. One is the manuscript part, and then the later part where mass printing comes in. Now, in the first part, the manuscript period, books are enormously important. As we heard this morning, they're important for culture, they're important for civilization, they're important for religion. We have, of course, the three the Abrahamic religions, which are all based on revealed books, revealed texts, sacred books, but also the Eastern religions, the sutras and so on, are also sacred. So books are extraordinarily important. They're important for interactions between civilizations. The transmission from Greek into Arabic and then back into Latin is one of the key ways in which civilizations interact with each other. And enormous importance for books, the growth of science and so on. But the other side of it, of course, is that books are not widely available or widely read. These are for a very small minority of people. On both the supply side and the demand side, there are caps on how much books are accessible to people. On the supply side, there's no printing, and books are expensive and difficult to produce. And then on the demand side, a lot of people the majority of people simply cannot read. Now, as we move into the print era, books retain their prominence and become vastly more available. So it's a real good news picture. This is the if you look at this enormous span of history that we began with this morning, from the sort of birth of the universe up to the present, we're at the sort of the tail end of the golden age of books, where books were both symbolically very important, culturally very important, but also widely available. Still very important in religion, arguably even more important in religion, because in things like Protestantism, it's very, very important for not just the priest to be able to read the Bible, but for everyone to have access. Growth of science, the Benedict Anderson Imagined Communities book about the birth of nation states was mentioned. Nation states grow up around books. Languages are formed around books, East European languages, Bulgarian and so on. These are to some extent creations of books, where somebody writes down a grammar and standardizes it. So books in this period retain and maybe even increase the prominence that they had in the earlier period, and they become more widely used and available. Again, both on the supply side and the demand side. On the supply side, they're enormously cheaper and easier to produce. On the demand side, more and more people can read, and there's a positive synergy between these two factors. Now, one of the things that happens, of course, and this gets us to the present, or starts to get us to the present, is the very trends that make for the mass availability of books: economic development, increase in technology, democratization, secularization. These trends are to some extent cause, or at least are associated with, the rise of competitors to the book, starting with newspapers, but then you follow with radio, film, television, and so on. And this has been going on at least for the last, say, 200 years, where books are doing well. They are increasingly available. You have Darnton's mass printing as another sort of turning point that he uses. But at the same time, there are these competing media. Now, I would argue that throughout, right on up to the end of the last century, and probably even in a residual way up to today, books retain a first among equal status among all these media. They're the thing in libraries. I mean, libraries are buying DVDs and music and films and so on. You can walk into any public library in the US or other countries and see these other media, but books libraries are fundamentally about books. Kids still use textbooks, and there are many, many positive synergies between these other media and books. Serialization, it goes back to Dickens. I mean, he would serialize his novels, and then they became great books. TVs and movies. I mean, the first 50 years of Hollywood, what did they do? They took the great books and made them into movies. Now, I would argue that now there's a good chance that we are really reaching a tipping point where the synergies between books and these other media are not necessarily positive anymore, and books are in danger of losing their primacy, which is another way of saying that reading is losing its primacy. The prize, it's no accident that the prize that is being awarded in Washington later this year is partly for illiteracy. That, there's an awful lot of people who can read and who do not read. Those of you who are flying back from Singapore, if you're in business class, go back to the back of the plane and take a look at what the people are doing. You will see hundreds of people, or if you're in coach, just look around you. You will see hundreds of people glued to their little screens. Very, very few of them are reading. So there's a real danger here that books and reading are being supplanted. Now, I would say just very quickly, the threats to reading, I think, have absolutely nothing to do with ebooks. And here I come in, my role as an internet practitioner. If you're a bookseller and you're thinking of the transition from paper to an ebook is a progressive, a radical change. But if you're working in the internet, actually ebooks are a traditional thing. They're a slowing down. The average internet user the bounce rates are about 50-60% for websites. People look at one page and are gone. They're on pages for 3, 4, 5 minutes. The internet is a kind of frenetic world where people jump around, and ebooks is actually a kind of slowing down where the medium delivers the book, but you put it on your Kindle, you put it on your iPad. So I think there's absolutely nothing in an ebook that threatens reading. If anything, it's exactly the contrary, that books and ebooks, books and reading have a lot to gain from the growth of ebooks. But there are other forces that I think are cutting the other way. And one is, of course, this loss of coherence that we talked about, and which the internet is full of. There's nothing like a canon anymore. Now, I know this is a very politically incorrect notion, because the idea of a canon got connected with dead white males and so on, so it's kind of been thrown out. But we had a wonderful idea this morning from one of our speakers who talked about, well, we have the rise of the non-Western country, so why can't we develop a truly universal canon of 100 books or whatever that everybody should read or at least be familiar with? That would be a great way of enforcing the idea that this certain group of books should be read. Again, I don't think that's going to happen, and in general, the decline of any support for a canon which is political, but also cuts against the idea of critical reading and so on, as needed, is I think, a potential threat to reading the book. Universal full text search, it's a wonderful tool. As a researcher, I use it, but it does tend to turn books into information rather than coherent narratives. You go to very powerful, whether it's searching within JSTOR or searching within Google Books, and you just plow through the books and pick up little snippets of information. That's completely different from reading a book slowly and engaging with an author, which has been the tradition. And last but not least, cheap and ubiquitous video. I mean, this is a little bit my thing on the back of the plane, but it's a fact of life. I mean, if you make video universally available to people, there's a story in the Straits Times today about China, where the people aren't reading enough books. But it's true of every country that people are going to video. It's seductive, it's easy, and so on. So these are all threats to reading, but I don't think they have anything to do with ebooks at all. If anything, I think there probably are ways in which ebooks can enforce reading, enforce the symbolic aspects of books, but it has to be an effort that's undertaken by librarians, by scholars, by educators, and so on. I will leave it at that.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Our second speaker, to give a complementary perspective as a publisher, as a commercial publisher, is Mr. Max Phua. Max is the Executive Director of World Scientific, which is the largest privately owned publisher in Singapore and one of the leading professional academic publishers in the world. Since holding senior positions in World Scientific and the group's subsidiaries, he has helped the company's revenue grow by 150% and profits correspondingly. Under his leadership, the company has broadened the products to include areas like research handbooks, general economics, and business books, as well as journals. He also works very closely with government agencies and other publishers to raise the profile of the Singapore publishing industry and skilled development for the industry. So with that, I pass the mic over to you. Thank you, Max.
Thanks, Paul. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to thank Ambassador Tomiko and NLB for making today's event possible and inviting me to share my views on the future of books this afternoon. My talk will be on my thoughts on the growing trend of ebooks and how it affects our everyday lives, the current consumer behavior, and the implication of the ebooks in the general publishing industry of today. As World Scientific is an Asian-based international academic publisher, I will focus a lot from an Asian perspective, looking at how this trend is changing the book business and markets globally, and how we learned and what are the lessons we learned being a publisher based in Singapore, but with readers globally. One of my very important view is that for ebooks, one size doesn't fit all. The trend and speed of whether the readers make the switch from print to electronic depends greatly on the type of publications. So I think we all have to ask ourselves in our daily lives, what are the, when do we read it electronically? When do we read it in print? So these are some of the things that, in a way, we can actually reflect it from our everyday experience. So, but of course, there are a lot of research actually done on this. And whether you prefer it in ebook, it depends on the genre, whether it's a comic book, fiction, textbooks, art books, children's books, travel books, and maps. All of it, actually the pace differs greatly. I believe this is largely due to how our brain reacts to these different types of content and our objective of reading these books. Actually, my views are rather simplistic. For content which we need to absorb in detail and to study, or when touching and feeling the book is necessary, print is generally preferred. But for content which are more for casual reading, or in a way where sophisticated features value adds to the reader's experience, electronic versions will likely be the preferred choice over time. Of course, this is in a way a generalization, but we do see a trend in specific genres of publications. To give you some example, some studies have shown that casual reading genre like romance, science fiction, thrillers are already almost 60% sold in ebook format. In a recent Scientific America article, polls and consumer reports indicate that actually computer screens and ebook readers fail to create a reading experience on paper, and our brain actually responds very differently to on-screen text than to words on paper. In an empirical study done by Jacob Nelson, an expert on website usability, he showed actually that reading on the screen is actually more tiring and is remembered more poorly than reading on paper. I'm not sure whether many of you do agree with that, but for my personal experience, actually, whenever I have to read a document or something that is, I have to really study, I usually print it out. I'll go through it, I'll underline it, I'll write it, and so, it is very logical. And it seems that pixelated microsecond flashes on the electronic devices do not engage the many regions of the brain as compared to print. So I would like to give an example in the case of textbooks. Besides being able to absorb materials in greater detail, we've done quite a number of surveys with students, and they still prefer print. So, the comments they gave was they like to open their textbooks, several textbooks at one go on their desk, with bits of papers, notes, stuff in between pages and words. They like to interact, to have that physical interaction with their textbooks, which they say help them absorb information and to learn. Even my 4-year-old and 5-year-old children, who are actually practically addicted to the iPads and iPhones, seem to prefer print over electronic books when it comes to performing simple learning activities like how to spell and how to do simple math problems. So you can see, even at that young age, when you have to do something to learn or to study, usually print is preferred. Now, having said that, most textbook publishers in our industry are currently investing millions and billions of dollars on new ebook technology and also learning systems. But currently, only 2% of textbooks in the US are fully digital. I believe this will still grow, but textbook will not ever be replaced in terms of print form. I believe in the future of textbooks will be a hybrid of online and print. So publishers which have invested heavily in these digital features, they also say and comment that they are not going away with print, but actually making them part of a customized learning experience. On the other hand, if you take a look at other genres, there are growing evidence that, for example, comic books. Comic book readers are slowly and actually gaining traction in terms of reading comics in E. After many years of declining sales, at the recent Comic-Con International, I think it's one of the largest comic book convention, and that was held in San Diego just last month. A major distributor of comic books, Comixology, announced that since 2009, unique downloads from its site totaled 180 million. But a huge spike the last 6 months of more than half, of almost 100 million downloads. So you can see that, the last 6 months has seen a huge increase in the downloads of comic books. And sales has increased 180% in 2012 compared with 2011. And its app was number 3 on Apple's list of top apps last year. So you can see that, the comic book genre is really moving very fast in that area. In the area that World Scientific know best, for the academic and research book segment, the many online features like reference linking, search, 3D diagrams, interactive charts, and have been proven to be very useful to scientists and academics. So these two technologies and features will be very useful, such as, for example, we cross-reference a CAT scan to a patient's medical history with existing cases in medical books. So things like that will be very useful. And at World Scientific, we are actually experimenting with some of these interactive features for our readers. We also make our ebooks collection available through flexible pick and choose, where actually many of our librarians and institutional customers really like. In terms of ebooks, I think a lot of debate has been going on in regards to digital rights management. I'd like to say a little bit on that because if you purchase an ebook directly through our platform, we do not have that, we call it the DRM. And one of the reasons, because it will encourage a usage between devices. I think right now, because of this restriction, it's a bit inconvenient to the readers. So we believe in making and working with many partners, as many partners globally as possible. And we were one of the first publishers who worked with Amazon and also Google, along with a lot of other ebook sites. So making your content as a publisher available in as many sites is important, but it's definitely not the end of the story. Many publishers think that getting their content on all these sites will translate to sales. I think we have all these experience as publishers or content producers that if you create an app or if you put your book on Amazon or various ebook sites, you'll sell. But that is actually not the case. You have to actually do a lot of marketing for the readers to be aware of your book. So I think in terms of a lot of gaming or app development, they do the same. A lot of people focus a lot on the development of their product. They put it on a certain website and they completely forget about it. But marketing is the crucial part. How are you going to get your readers? And in a way, it's the same as traditional book publishing. You have to do your marketing, right? So there's no doubt that ebooks bring many features like the convenience of storing your entire library into small portable devices, accessibility, price, search, linking, convenience of purchasing, multiple media capabilities, updating of information, and even social media elements of a book, or what we call social book, allowing people to read collectively, similar to a multiplayer kind of gaming. But I think personally, I wouldn't really like to do that. It's still a personal kind of like a time when I read a book. But we do see global sales of ebooks reaching 859 million last year from a previous estimate of 567 million. So that's a huge increase. And Amazon reported in January of this year that it sells more Kindle ebooks than paperback books. So that's actually earlier this year. So for every 115 ebooks sold, there were about 100 paperbacks sold in the US. But the growth of ebooks is actually slowing down compared with the triple-digit increase in recent years. So ebook still remains the fastest growing segment, but it's actually still 20% of all book sales, right? Interesting data shows that hardcover sales actually also increased 6% last year in the US. So is there a positive correlation between ebooks and print books? I think this is something that is a very interesting statistics. I believe that ebook sales will reach a natural state of equilibrium where there will be a market consisting of readers using print and ebooks in their variety of ways based on genre of publication and geographic locations. There will be, of course, a group of readers preferring to read in both formats. In the recent survey, when asked, have you purchased an ebook or print in the last 12 months, 10% have purchased an ebook, 35% purchased a print, and 50% actually have bought both ebooks and print. So you can see there is a natural kind of like a correlation. And it could mean that ebooks is encouraging a kind of like a reading renaissance, I feel. Because when you read ebooks, you want to buy print and also So I think having a very optimistic view of the trend, I think it sort of reinforces each other. After some time, of course, the first couple of years, everyone's rushing. The early adopters are actually using the ebooks, but eventually there will be a market, that is pretty settled. I'd like to share a little bit on the Asian market. The market for ebooks in Asia has been growing, but it actually varies from country to country. In Korea, the size of the ebook market has actually hit 519 million in 2013, so this year, a growth of 80% over the previous year. A captured local language market, along with the popularity of mobile devices in Korea, contributed to this growth. So ebooks growth is actually very promising in Korea. In another big market in China, total ebook sales increased from 1.4 billion yuan to 2.48 billion yuan, up 77%. And that was 3 years ago in 2010, and now I think it's a lot more. And China also leads the world with a very impressive 293% year-on-year growth rate for Apple and Android mobile devices. So actually the potential is there. But still, right now, a majority of ebooks in China are still bought by libraries instead of consumers. Closer to home, some countries in ASEAN has made some very successful attempts at ebook development, especially for local content. One country is Thailand. Thailand has managed to develop actually a very successful local ebook store called Oakbee. And Oakbee currently has 88% of the country's market. It sells mainly in the local language, Thai language, which actually international sites cannot compete at the moment or are not competing at the moment. In Malaysia, there are initial successes from local ebook sites providing content in both local and English languages. I'm guessing that these sites will actually do better with their local language ebook sales. Higher Learning Institutes currently is the country's largest ebook users at the moment. Vietnam and Indonesia, with its big and huge potential markets, have great potential. But at the moment now, there are concerns in regards to pricing and also intellectual property protection. Coming back to Singapore, Singapore is actually the world's #4 in smartphone penetration and the world #2 in tablet penetration in 2012. So it seems like it is a great opportunity for ebooks, but actually you'll be surprised to know that the top 4 usage for our mobile devices are apps, social media, video, and actually instant messaging. So actually, but that's not to say that Singaporeans do not read. So we're just using the mobile devices for other, usage. Singaporeans actually spend an estimated more than $40 million US purchasing books through overseas websites in 2010, with 400,000 monthly unique visitors clicking on Amazon. So you can see that there's a lot of seepage. And that is, even though Amazon, Google, Barnes & Noble did not sell their ebooks or e-readers directly to Singapore consumers until recently. Kindles were purely not shipped here, and until recently, ebooks were not available from Singapore's Apple's iTunes store. But Singaporeans find ways to purchase them through gift cards, third-party shippers, and other methods. But I learned that recently Apple, Google, and also Amazon has been making plans to focus on actually Singapore market, which will see their market share grow, and hopefully more people would also be encouraged to read. In Singapore, due to the high usage of the English language and actually being in a more globalized environment, we do see a lot of seepage of ebooks and also print book sales to international sites like Amazon, Apple, Sony, Kobo. Recent local ebook sites like I Love Books and Scoop, even with their marketing muscle, found it hard to compete with these international sites. So we don't have a natural barrier, to prevent seepage because we are living in such a globalized environment here in Singapore. In World Scientific, we started our ebook program over 10 years ago. So currently, 25% of our ebooks are sold as e-version. And we have around 7,000 ebooks, and we sell them individually and as a collection. So basically, maybe as a note to other publishers, our strategy has always been to make our ebooks available in as many relevant platforms as possible. And
sorry, Max.
Yeah.
Timekeeper is waving frantically at me.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if maybe you didn't see him.
Okay. Sorry, I'll finish up. So the thing is to try to make sure that you're available in as many places as you can. One of the important thing that I would like to talk about is I feel that it's very important to talk about physical bookshops. In a recent New York Times article, it mentioned that the sale of ebooks actually fell immediately after borders in the US went down. So there is a correlation between the sale of ebooks and bookstores. Unfortunately, it could be that more people are browsing in bookstores and actually buying the print or e-version online. So I hope that physical bookshops, because they're so important like librarians to the whole ecosystem of our reading culture and knowledge culture, find a way to have a sustainable business model. I really think that that is possible. So the bottom line is that it is very important for us publishers to produce the best quality content which readers want and need and market to the right community. Give the readers the choice of whether they want it in print, digital, or both. So using food as an analogy, if you sell chicken rice, the most important is the rice, chili, and the chicken, right? So whether your customer want it on the plate, in the bowl, or in one of those nicely laid out set, let them decide. Hopefully in the future, we will be able to consume content via multiple platforms. Some people might do the following: hear or watch an author read or an audio or video book, read it on the e-reader on the move, and also own the same book in a beautiful hardcover and displaying it on the book shelf. That would be nice for authors and publishers. With that, I would like to thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Max. Very comprehensive overview, and I share your optimism. To hear whether our third speaker shares the same view that there is going to be a reading renaissance as a result of ebooks, can I invite Mr. Ken Wissoker. Ken is the editorial director of Duke University Press, and he acquires books in humanities, social sciences, media, and the arts. Two of the books he published, this is going to take a bit. Yeah, so I'll read a bit. I'll read a bit more. Two of the books he published were selected as the New York Times Book of the Year. Richard Klein's Cigarettes Are Sublime. I can imagine the Ministry of Health being a bit worried about that one. And Walt Audet's In the Shadows of the Epidemic. Mr. Wissoker is also the author of the recent Cinema Journal essay, which is coincidentally named The Future of the Book as a Media Project. Over to you, Ken.
Thanks to everyone. This has been a really wonderful day, really good discussion. And I'm going to pick up, I think, on Max's chicken and rice person, so please hang on. I'm a publisher in the humanities and the interpretive social sciences. I believe that the book is here to stay. What we mean by the book, however, is an open question. I want to talk a little today about the form of the book and how that might shift with the media in which it is published and read. What defines a book now? For the kind of readable but academic, cutting edge but well-researched, and as many rounds of peer review as it takes to get it right books that we publish, it starts with an argument, an intervention. The author is trying to convince a plausible readership of something significant. The book lays out the evidence for that argument over a series of chapters. The chapters might form a continual narrative history. They might represent different moments or perspectives in an ethnography. They might explore a theoretical or philosophical idea over a series of chapters. In each disciplinary version, it's what we call a long-form argument, something too complex and requiring too much extensive development to be fully presented or fully convincing at essay length. My authors and readers are not, for the most part, positivists. They aren't filling in niches, the colonial era anthropologist finding an uncatalogued group of non-Western people, or the art historian finding a not yet described altarpiece. Those authors don't need readers. They need people in adjoining niches, or those trying to get a comprehensive picture, one building block at a time, or people searching for information. Our authors may end up with that kind of readership, but generally as a secondary form of success. Their ambition is to change the way people think about something larger than the topic. How much does it matter if this kind of book, this long-form argument, is read on a Kindle, an iPad, or on paper? At first glance, not much. A reader can still start at the beginning and be enthralled, or not, be excited about the argument, or not, love or hate the prose. They can read through to the conclusion or toss the device, paper-bound or electronic, across the room in disgust after reading the first paragraph. While I publish books that are mostly read by scholars, students, and others intellectually inclined, the same would hold for fiction or biographies. Last week, we were on holiday. Physical books predominated among the many readers at our beach, but there were plenty of Kindle readers. There was no sense that one or the other preferred a different length of novel or a different genre. On the other hand, as a publisher, I know that I push authors to shape their manuscripts into a pre-given form all the time. Sometimes I'm doing that serving our needs as a publisher. Sometimes those needs are financial, about the manufacturing costs, or about how an author's choices might affect the market. No, your book cannot be 300,000 words. That would be 900 pages. No, splitting it into 3 volumes would be a bad idea. No, you can't have all the illustrations in color printed in the place they are discussed. That will cost too much. These fold-out maps would look cool, but are they really necessary? Other times, the push to form is more structural. Chapters should be roughly the same length. We expect a 250-page book to have 5 or 6 of them, not 40. There can be exceptions, but those riff off the rule. What does a preface do, or a conclusion? Many writing concerns are more subtle, like pacing, or deciding when one needs to remind a reader who or what something is, and when that would feel repetitive. What needs explanation or citation, and what should one assume a reader would already know? All these conventions for writing and shaping a manuscript are based in an unspoken way around the needs and affordances of the physical book, and are assumptions about how they will be read. We would suggest not starting each chapter with a summary of the last, at least outside of very basic textbooks. We know readers may skip around, but we don't advise authors to write for the reader who skips ahead. In the end, she triumphs, but to write for the reader who reads from the beginning to the end. Some books are too long to be bound in one volume without tiny type, Bible-thin paper, and a crowded page design. Others are too small to have a spine without blank pages, as in the wallpaper city guides, or large type and spacing. I've been talking about an Anglo-American culture of English language academic books. Different languages and cultures of reading will have different standards, and the history of the book field is devoted, as we heard this morning, to the many ways that variety has shifted over time. But all of these conventions, the size that feels right to hold in one's hand or lay on one's coffee table, the length, the number of chapters and how they proceed, all have grown up in a media-specific environment specific to the printed book. What happens as ways of reading and accessing books shift to electronic forms? I would argue that the best practices of writing and what we as publishers desire will shift along with those forms, the same way a talk delivered as a PowerPoint is different than one written to be read, or a version of the same talk that would be published in a journal. A print billboard tells its short message in a very different way than an electronic video ad of the same dimensions and in the same space. So what happens as books are found more and more online in e-versions? Not just bought and read as a unit, like on a Kindle, but accessed, like scholarly journals, as part of a large collection of works. If one knows what book one is looking for, I need to read Lauren Berlant's Cruel Optimism, it is still there. But as soon as one searches by keywords across a collection of books, one begins to access them in very different ways. One searches for the terms Japan, youth, precarity, and some books, some chapters of books, and some journal articles all come up at once. Where does one start reading? One thinks of the reader on their Keta or mobile device. How long should a book be for them? If a reader is reading on a tablet or another device connected to the web, and the book has to compete with social media or videos, what does it need to do to be compelling? The desires and aims of authors are changing too. As more and more authors learn to program, and as there are more tools that allow non-programmers to produce complex multimedia projects, the equivalent of WordPress in the US for blogging, what kind of work will authors want to write? Won't even the person with that boring project on the altarpiece want to show it in 3 dimensions. To return to where I began, it's easy to imagine any long-form argument being pushed in each of these directions. Think of a book on the history of jazz in East Asia. That's a big topic, but if we were doing it in print, I would still hope for a 300 or 400-page book. It'd be pretty long, but it's a big topic. On the other hand, if one assumes that the main way readers were going to find the book was by searching online in a large collection, one might want to mention every important player and all of the significant clubs. It would also be good to mention international tours. So if a researcher were writing a book, say, on pianist Randy Weston, they would find this book by searching for his name. In a world where books were found by search, every detail could be an entry point. Add all this up, and we could easily have a book the equivalent of 1,200 pages. On the other hand, if you picture someone reading the same book on an iPad or their phone, all those club and artist names, all that detail, it's only going to lose readers. What's the real story here? How compelling can it be so the reader keeps reading rather than moving over to email or to a game? Maybe this story could be told much more efficiently. So do you think we could get this down to about 75 pages? Or maybe there should be a video of some of the players or of some of the clubs. What about archival sound recordings? It's not that the 375-page print version is better than the 1,200-page searchable version or the 75-page mobile version. They're media specific. Here's another wrinkle. At Duke University Press, we have all our journals up on the Highwire platform, which is located at Stanford. It hosts Oxford University Scholarship Online, and we're moving all our books there. We're starting to ask authors to write chapter abstracts, the way journal authors write abstracts for their articles. That would allow someone searching across the books and journals to make their own collection, like putting together a playlist at the iTunes store. The pieces could be articles or chapters. Here's my Arjuna Padarai playlist, his greatest hits, according to me, or the top pieces on precarity and Japanese youth. If that became a significant enough way of reading, we'd have to examine other assumptions about writing. Maybe the author has to start every chapter by repeating the book's overarching argument, rather than assuming that the reader has read the introduction. Currently, such repetition would insult the reader. You think I didn't pay attention? In a future, where most readers are reading in pieces, it might be necessary, another form of media specificity. None of this should be surprising. The sound that record producers looked for in the '78 era had to be different than that of the stereo LP era. The punchy sound of an early '60s hit made for car radios would be different than the mix for a club today. If you listen to the very same blues recording played on a '78, this is really library archival geek stuff. If you listen to the very same blues recording on a '78, on a 45, on an LP, on a CD, as an MP3, it sounds different in every one. If you were a producer, you would mix the song for the medium at the time. So we, the book producers, at this time, what sound do we want? Do we want to presume the long book that will be read online, the short book that must compete with the web and that should be readable on a phone, the book that will be read in pieces, or the one that will be read from beginning to end? Will the flat page of text remain the dominant form, or will that book become the equivalent of loving vinyl LPs today? To me, this is the central quandary for publishing now. One could argue for any of these possibilities and offer reasons. The best answer for the present, there's the maxes, the best answer for the present is actually D, all of the above. Okay. As a University Press publisher, we send everything we publish out for peer review. After the reviews, the authors revise. Then, even when the book is already under contract, we send it out to the reviewers again, and sometimes the authors must revise again. Authors have delays of their own, moves, family, job obligations, writing struggles, waits for research time and funding. All told, it's not uncommon for a book to take 4 or 5 years from receiving the initial proposal to our publishing the finished book. So that proposal that while I'm here, my assistant is sending out today, that book which might come out in 2017 or 2018, when the author says, how long do I make it? D, all of the above, is not the answer they're looking for. They won't want to be told to make a 75-page version and a 1,200-page version. As smaller publishers, we don't have the capital to assume all of the above either. Should we be investing in getting all those books up online at Highwire? Or should the money go to mobile formats, or to new social reading, or multimedia publishing platforms? At Duke University Press, we publish 120 books a year, much smaller, and the whole book program is supported by our journals publishing, so the press as a whole breaks even. The uncertainty of multiple possible futures, which is more likely to increase than to settle out soon, requires a lot of simultaneous investment. These are expensive investments that are bound to pay off unevenly at best. Through all of this, I'm confident that the book, that long-form argument, will persist. Then again, I own a 78 player and a good shelf of 78s. But what the form of the book will be, frustratingly, is anyone's guess. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. And to wrap up today's discussion, I'd like to invite Mr. Stephen Cole. We've heard from two publishers and a librarian. We're going to hear from a retailer, an e-retailer. Stephen Cole founded eBooks Corporation in 1997. In 2000, he launched ebooks.com, which has grown to be the world's leading independent ebook store. eBook Library was launched in 2004 and is now the premier ebook vendor for academic and research libraries around the world. In addition to selling ebooks direct to consumers, ebooks.com provides fulfillment services to book publishers and retailers such as Springer and Cambridge University Press. We don't have a bricks and mortar publisher on this panel, although I know they are in the audience, so I guess they can pipe up. And also, I found out from Stephen last night that he used to run an independent bookstore in Perth. So in a way, the bricks and mortar bookseller is represented. Yes. Over to you, Stephen.
Hello. Thank you for having me, Professor Koh, and the National Library Board. I'm grateful to be here. As Paul said, in my heart I am a bookseller. My wife and I established a bookshop in Perth, Western Australia in 1980. So most of my working life I've been a bookseller. The reason I'm emphasizing this is that I have perhaps a differing view to some of the others expressed just now with regard to the future of printed books, and that is specifically what I'm going to address here now. But by way of an appeal for forgiveness from you, I must say I'm not entirely comfortable about what I see is the future, but I'm going to tell you what I see, and we'll see how that goes. As Max mentioned, a recent report from the American Association of Publishers signaled that the apparently inexorable growth of e-book sales has stalled. Having captured 24% of the book market, the digital juggernaut ran out of puff and stopped. To the relief of booksellers and bibliophiles everywhere, it looks as if e-books are going to take their place just as another format alongside audiobooks, leaving plenty of room for printed books. Apart from almost from the moment that e-book sales took off, the format recorded triple-digit annual growth rates in the US and in the other markets that ebooks.com addresses, largely English language developed economies. But last year, growth slowed to just 45%. Just 45. That's not too bad in the scheme of things, but when you consider we were looking at 200, 150, this is a poor performance. But wait, it gets worse, because just in the last few months, the evidence coming out is that, in fact, e-book sales have flatlined. So the sales for June and July, roughly equivalent to what they were in the same period last year. So it looks very much like an abrupt halt. Sales of e-book readers, the devices themselves, may be declining. There are indications that is also flatlined or is even dipping. There's even evidence that some early adopters are putting their Kindle into their bottom drawer and returning to print. So for those of us who've enjoyed a lifetime of visual, tactile, and olfactory pleasure from printed pages, any sign that printed books are going to survive in this digital age is welcome. But these trends and headlines bear some closer scrutiny. First, what caused the slowdown in e-book adoption? The short answer, in my view, is that the market became saturated. It should have been clear to us from the outset that there's a limit to the number of people who would actually want an e-book. For now, the natural market for e-books includes a lot of early adopter enthusiasts. These are the people that came tumbling onto ebooks.com when we launched it in September of 2000. But also, we have a huge number of what we call extreme users. I'm sure there must be a more literate way of describing these people, but these are the people who read 2 or 3 books a week, maybe. So they've really embraced the e-book for obvious commercial reasons, but also it's convenient. You can carry all of those books in your pocket. E-books are naturally appropriate, of course, to travelers, professionals, and scholars. It's likely that these natural users will continue to prefer the digital for obvious reasons. But there is another group of users who could be described as normal people who were bullied into getting into the e-book bandwagon by friends, family, and especially by a monumental, spectacular, brute force marketing campaign that's gone on for the last 5 years from major global book retailers who are determined that if anyone is going to convert to digital, they should convert in that particular way. So what we've had is from in recent years is what I would say is a kind of artificial situation where the natural users came in and the growth was growing at a good, steady, strong rate. But then we had this tsunami of cash that was poured into forcing us, innocent, normal people, to adopt e-books against our better judgment. And so we ended up with a kind of bloated situation where there are more people reading e-books than should. There are countless thousands of Kindles and Nooks in the hands of grandmothers and uncles who receive them from well-meaning gifts. Millions of us succumbed to the unprecedented brute force marketing campaigns. But having tried the e-book experience, some of us are now drifting back to print. The novelty simply wore off. But many of us, I think as Max said, are in fact doing both. We're buying digital and print. If we're in a bookshop and we see a book we like, we buy it. If we're browsing or searching online and we find a book, we'll download it and read it on a phone. That's certainly what I do. Notwithstanding the current hiatus, there are 3 drivers that determine the destiny of any market: innovation, price, and demography. What happens next with e-books will be a function of these 3 things. By innovation, I don't mean enhanced e-books. There's a lot of heat being generated these days about adding cool things to books to make them more interesting. Video and audio are tops, links to external resources, functional mathematical formulae, in-book collaboration, that sort of thing. There's probably value in all of these things, but the more of it there is, the less clear it is that the object that you're enhancing is still a book. So I'm really going to address myself to the long-form text that consists mostly of text and pages. But the innovation that I look forward to is not so much about added functionality as about elegant simplicity. Today's e-books are still a slightly awkward simulacrum of a printed book. We've tried perhaps too hard to replicate the print experience, which is good in some ways, but sometimes it's just a bit silly. In fact, our own Android app has a wooden bookshelf, which we're really going to have to fix that. But you can't just pick up a book and flip through it. You know, you grab a book and you turn the pages and you can quickly find where you were at. This is not possible yet with an e-book. Even turning pages, after all the practice that I've had, is still, slightly weird. It's a bit funny. And you touch it too quickly or in the wrong place and something bounces and anyway. So e-books, frankly, are not there yet, despite the fact that we were all kind of made to embrace them, not the least by people like me. But having said that, there are thousands of people working night and day to improve the experience and make it at least match the printed book experience in its elegance and its simplicity. But the thing is that it won't stop when we get there. There will come a point in the development of and the functionality and the features of e-books where it actually, even for people like us, is better than picking up a printed book. There'll be a time, quietly, when the experience of reading and managing your e-books will actually surpass that of paper. The second driver of e-book adoption is demography. While the natural market for e-books sits at about 24% of the total market today, the relentless march of generations will have its way. My Generation X children and their friends already get 85% of their news and information from a screen. My grandchildren are digital natives. There's no doubt that by the time they enter consumer mainstream, which is only 10 years away, they'll prefer digital over paper. But finally, and I think this is the killer, sorry, is that the right word? No, that's not a good word. This is the decisive factor. Price. It costs money to print, store, distribute, and finally pulp books. The low price channel always wins. The massive downward pressure in recent years has been a boon for consumers who are buying e-books. But more importantly, all that pressure simply accelerated a process that was already inevitable. It's true that the capital costs incurred by publishers and booksellers in retooling for the digital age are considerable. But, and I know this, having built the infrastructure, the unit cost of production per e-book sold is tumbling. And e-books have the capacity to just keep getting cheaper in the coming years. Consumer expectations and the natural competition between publisher and publisher and bookseller will continue to drive e-book prices ever lower. The widening gap between e-book and print editions, combined with the improved usability and generational growth in demand for e-books, will precipitate a moment of collapse for printed books. Improvements in book production processes and distribution services may delay things, but there will come a point where ever smaller print runs will push the unit price of printed books upwards beyond tolerance, and something will break. It will no longer be economic for publishers to ship books or for booksellers to pay rent. When it happens, it will happen quickly, over a year or two. There will always be a market for printed books, just as there is still a market for vinyl records. and fountain pens. But the real future, a golden future for long-form literary works, is digital. All things considered, I expect the print book market to collapse on the 12th of September 2020. But just in closing, I want to make a point that's already been made several times. It's not about the wrapper, it's about what's inside the wrapper. Books are going to be with us forever. They are the single most powerful means of shifting society. They give a level of understanding and a depth of entertainment and insight that is just not possible through other media today. The only thing that troubles me is honestly, as a bookseller, actually we sold our bookshop to some very dear friends of ours, so I have a personal interest in this, is what happens to bookshops. If I'm right about this, booksellers have to focus on what it is that distinguishes them and their service from the internet. Now, frankly, really, it's not that hard. It's recognizing what those distinctions are. It's about engagement. It's about genuine recommendations, personal relationships. The challenge is, how does a bookseller take that, exploit those existing assets in a world where soon books are going to be digital? I look forward to the answer to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen, for that slightly grim, dystopic view into the future. Just being provocative, we have some 10-15 minutes for questions, but before we get to the floor, and I'm sure you're all bursting with questions, having scribbled copious notes, I will ask the gentlemen if they have anything to add on, because I'm sure there are some differing views, after hearing each other. Anything to pipe up? No? No? All being polite here? No? No, you're not reaching for the microphone. Okay, perhaps I can throw the questions to the floor. Are there any questions from the floor for our panelists? I have one or two questions, but I'd like to give you first right. I know in the audience we have booksellers. Don't hide, I know you're there. Authors, writers, publishers certainly as well. I know you're there, don't hide. Yes, we have a question. Okay. There would be librarians here, I would imagine, yes?
So my question concerns a bit about the power and the ownership of books. As a librarian, I'm aware that when I buy an e-book, it's not the librarian's book anymore, or the library's book, it's a book of the bookseller. And in the moment the company decides that the license is closed, then the book is gone from my shelf, be it virtual or whatever. So how do you see this problem we have to solve for all the library's sake and for our readers, and for my personal collection of e-books as well?
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't ask you to introduce yourself. You are?
I'm a librarian. I'm of the Goethe Institute in Jakarta. Christel Mahnke is my name. Thank you.
Thank you. Perhaps, yes.
I think I'll probably take a shot at this question. There are companies out there who actually provide archiving services for libraries. And I think some of the well-known ones are, for example, Protocol. And basically what they do is that they guarantee that if libraries purchase a kind of like collection or books from publishers, if the publisher actually, for example, do not exist anymore, it's a kind of an insurance for the libraries to continue ownership of that digital content. Not sure whether that helps.
No.
I think that part of the capitalization of digital information is leading to exactly this kind of, could you license things for shorter and shorter amounts of time? We've, at the same time that there are many people who would like everything to be free, all information should be free because that's what the information wants for itself. There are others who are trying to charge for smaller and smaller bits of ownership over time. And that's a problem for us as publishers as well, because a lot of people who can license artist rights have taken that same approach. So they'll say, oh, you can use this reproduction of this artwork for 5 years. And I'm like, well, we're publishing this book. The person who's going to read it needs to see the artwork in the same way if they're reading it in a library in 10 years or 20 years. And I think that's a real danger. And the kind of idea of supplying things in perpetuity, it's nice to put that on paper, but as you say, if the publisher goes out of business or if the rights are somehow taken away and then libraries or, in fact, the thing disappears from the book, that's a genuine problem.
Thanks. Yes, we have a question there.
My name is Wissoker from Books Kinokuniya, Singapore here. I'm fascinated with the panel discussions, but one thing which bothers me is a question about the technology over price and anything else. People talk about a DRM and cloud, and so you buy books, but you literally not download, but your collection is kept somewhere else, etc., etc. And the version changes, and HTML, XML, and many, many technologies will change forever. But if it is often said that printed books is the best technology to convey information and the thought, and the storage as well. So when Amazon goes, for example, your Kindle collection, is it safe and secure? So that when you're 100 years old, are you still being able to read? And that there is a kind of a fear or apprehension about your ownership and your collection. And you sometimes want to buy from Kindle or from Kobo or from probably Kinokuniya. But how do you manage those two multi-platforms that you may choose, as you might choose to buy from Kinokuniya on the street, or books, MPAs or Times, or even Borders to come? So my question is, what's your view about the technology and the security of your content? Thank you.
Thank you, Sogo-san. Gentlemen, anyone like to address this issue of the anxiety over ownership?
Well, I would address just part of the question, which is the question of as technologies change, what things remain readable. Those of us who are old enough to have things that were stored on floppy disks often cannot go back and take up those writing projects again because we can't get back to those things. So if a student does their thesis and it is only in an electronic form and it's multimedia now, could someone in 20 years come back and do a historical project on those theses done in this department? Probably, maybe yes, maybe no, but possibly quite not. And I think in that way, trying to think about the archive and what forms need to be available for the future, even as technologies change so much and there isn't necessarily the investment at first in trying to keep things legible. I think that's a really good question.
John, how do you approach this?
Well, the Library of Congress and many national libraries have a mandate to preserve digital material, and that includes migration. And many of them are doing a very good job on that. But it's a little bit of a cost sharing type thing. If we have the private entities that own the content, making the money off of the production of books and sale of books, particularly if it gets narrower and narrower for a shorter time. But we have the public sector picking up the archiving costs and so on, then that's an imbalance, and that's going to be very hard to sustain. But I think in general, national libraries and national archives are very aware of this problem and are working it very hard.
Yes, we have a gentleman behind. Yes, yes. That's Mr. Chopert. Yes.
Yes, I wanted to just thank you everybody for wonderful presentations. I just wanted to introduce one more troublesome kind of equation into the mix. We've looked at retail and the shift between online and print bookselling and how that's hurting retail, which is such an important part of city culture, right, the bookshop. But there's another element which I'm also quite concerned about. As it's possible now to go to a bookshop and find a book you like and then order the ebook version or order it online from Amazon or No Queue. And I've seen many people actually doing this in Singapore with no shame whatsoever. It is equally possible now to check out the book from the library. The NLB has done a terrific job and the vendors have done terrific jobs in making ebook access much more accessible, much faster, much easier. So that I have also done this in a bookshop, you know, sort of said, oh, well, I'm not going to keep this book. Why don't I just check it out from the library right there in the thing? So ebook downloads in Singapore from the National Library System are now about, the last figure I saw for end of fiscal year, March 31st, 2012 was 3.9 million, if I think. So that's actually getting up to about 15% of the total downloads, of the total borrowings. So the ecosystem is changing quite dramatically. So this is not really a question, but if anybody has any thoughts on how this can be turned to the positive, but more a comment and a request that actually we do all need to sit down together, publishers, booksellers, and librarians, and really think about this stuff quite hard. And you know, this is obviously a good format to do it.
Thank you.
In my former role as the CEO of EBL, the Academic Library Service, this was an issue that came up quite often. I think that it's fair to say that book publishers have a reasonable fear that a business like EBL or eBrary, or Overdrive for that matter, might enter into a single global national agreement with the government, such that you, in the worst case scenario, you would end up selling one book to a country. I mean, clearly that's not going to happen. The compact that we, as an academic library ebook aggregator, made with our publishers was that we would keep them up to date on what was going on, keep them aware of those trends. At some point, it's going to happen, and there's a problem there with regard to what happens if you have a truly successful national library service. Well, there is going to be a crunch. There's going to be a problem, because if that service begins to cannibalize or eat into the otherwise reasonable expectations of revenue of a publisher, then the publisher will come back to the library service to renegotiate terms. I mean, I don't have a problem with a publisher selling a single book to a country, provided that the publisher is compensated appropriately. And frankly, there's no particular issue with that, as long as the publisher and the author ultimately is paid for their efforts. But we're just at the beginning. In Australia, where our business kind of dominates the academic library space, we have deals with all of the state libraries, but usage has not been as you've suggested. But we would probably be raising a flag. Not that I'm in that business anymore, so that's all right. But if I were, we would be raising a flag at some point. Does that answer the question?
I think so. Yeah. I think the gentleman in front. Yes.
Thank you. We've been talking really about print and electronic publishing and retailing and so on. But I suspect that the bigger issue is the general copyright structure that relates the producers of the material, who are the authors, the producers are packagers of it, and the distributors of that material, and the ultimate consumers. And the libraries in between who provide services by collecting that and giving it here. And fundamentally, I'm having a lot of troubles, for example, in much of the Arab world, and I'm sure it's true of also parts of the English-speaking world, with a very large number of books that are under copyright but out of print. Not to mention orphan works that are extremely difficult to trace, to find whoever may have a copy or whatever we can do with it and find one. Plus that under enormous lobbying, primarily by Disney, but also by others, we've extended copyright laws beyond any limit, so that Abbas al-Aqad, who died in 1964 in Egypt, wrote a poem back in 1919, and I'm trying to publish it, and well, under our laws, which are only 50 years after death, I have to wait till next year. I've been trying to publish that poem for the last 7 years. There's no heirs, no nothing, can't find the people, can't do anything, can't negotiate something with anybody. Surely that is not in the best interest of anybody. And that we have to rethink the whole relationship. And I think this is where there's an opportunity. I like to be an optimist and everything. There's an opportunity to actually invent new models and not try to constantly adapt the past models. And I think this is where we need some bold thinking, but where in fact I regret that seemingly the publishers are very concerned about what's happening to their revenue base and trying to protect it rather than trying to say, well, okay, we'll make a totally new product. We'll think of something very different. I mean, the only imaginative new model that I have seen has been iTunes. That was really the only new model designed to a new technology that provided the users with the chance of single downloads that would be paid for legitimately and so on in different ways. Now, we need a lot more imagination. And I would hope that gatherings of people, distinguished people like all of the people here on this panel and elsewhere and many other fora, would yield debates and brainstorming about ideas rather than all the concerns about what we might do by losing this. And just to give you a really very important thing, private businesses in the internet world are all in this constant situation of either reinventing themselves or they go out of business. Palm went out of business. BlackBerry, which was an enormously successful company, Resource in Motion, is about to go out of business and so on in a few very short years, not 70 years after the life of the death of the author. So I mean, surely something is not in tune. And we're talking about going into the electronic era, into the future, and we're still defending things that even the founding fathers, when they wrote that clause in the American Constitution, had only 14 years in mind, not all of this. So can I ask the panel to respond to where do you see the future if you were to scrap all of the system we have and reinvent it?
Thank you, Dr. Ismail. Anyone wants to hazard?
Maybe I'll have a go of this. I'm a true advocate of, with ebooks right now, I'm a true advocate that we shouldn't go with digital rights management. Because I think, I do not believe that, it is a good kind of a feature for readers. Because if you buy or download your book in a Kindle, you can't really transfer it to a Kobo or Apple at the moment because of all these DRM. It's basically, they are being locked at the moment. So, although I'm speaking from a perspective of a publisher, I know that I wouldn't be very popular, advocating this because, it's something that we all discussed a lot. I think that, in a way, publishers should be more flexible in terms of our copyright. In World Scientific, we have never rejected, any author in regards to them asking to reproduce their, chapters or their whole books, or, So we have this kind of philosophy since the founding of our company, and I totally agree with you that something new has to be looked at because we ourselves find it very difficult to, obtain the copyright of some of the author's previous works. And then we approach other publishers and they come to us and they say, you have to pay this amount, or, they just give a very inconvenient kind of like a situation. So I do agree with you on this.
How do you feel about intellectual property rights in general?
I'm very much for the contract between society and creative people, that they should get something out of what they do. But I think that the current system is terrible. The current system is not working, and I'll give you an example of that. You may recall that when Christopher Reeve did that famous film on Superman, some people pointed out that the two people who created Superman were living in misery and poverty in Chicago at the time and didn't get a damn penny out of that. And I think that's terrible. Same thing about paintings. A young artist, a struggling artist, makes a painting, sells it for $1,000. It gets resold 10 years later for $100,000, 10 years after that for $1 million. By then, the artist is still alive and doing well, but he got only the original 1,000. I think he should get a percentage of every single sale after that, the artist. And we're paying Christie's and we're paying Sotheby's 6% for the banging of the gavel, but we're not paying the artist. So I think that's wrong.
Okay, well,
and the same thing is true. So I do believe intellectual property rights need to be rethought in terms of the original contract between society and creative people, and to recognize that other factors are in between. Now, publishers used to have a much different function in the past. They were the ways in which we introduced new writers to the field and so on. Great publishers recognized talent which wasn't easily recognizable before. But the new technology and the new world is giving us new opportunities which require, I think, thinking of new models.
If you let me just wander off for half an hour, I'll come back with a model that covers everything you just said.
Okay. We'll have a chance later over coffee.
Yeah, one more question, the gentleman behind.
Good afternoon. Okay, I'm Stephen Chong from Cambridge University Press, and we kind of like touch on the fear factor of the publishers, and we talk about the opportunities. And we see a growth, tremendous growth of opportunities in ebooks, everybody going in, and we see a rise in revenue. But at the same time, I think publishers are also kind of fear what the records company has gone through. They see a drop in the physical products, and they see a closure of the physical stores. And the opportunities is, with an ebook, we are able now to produce a single copy at a time, the print-on-demand technology. And Max talked about, we do also have authors who came to us and said, in order for us to publish the books with you, I need to have the rights to have the final page proof on my website to be openly downloaded. And in fact, we see there is a trend of having those books available free. We see an increase in print. But again, we do not have enough statistics to prove that having ebooks available freely does help increase in print. But we are kind of like in the transition stage of trying to safeguard the revenue in case there's a tremendous drop in print and the digital revenue are not able to kind of like break even what we used to make, the company might be gone forever. So for Cambridge, the philosophy now is every book we produce, it will never go out of print because of the print-on-demand technology. And we are also going all the way back now. We have about 25,000 titles. Even books that are out of print 50 or 70 years ago, we are getting them back in digital form to be available in digital and at the same time to be available in print format.
Thank you. So is this just a general comment?
It's a general comment of fear from the publishers, but from this fear, at the same time, there are opportunities because of the digital POD technology. The POD now contributes up to about 15%, 1/5 of the publisher revenue, from an academic publisher's point of view. So it's important to look at the opportunities at the same time to balance the fear of e-book, because people feel that e-book should be free. So we are kind of like in that battle of a pricing print and e. How can we get a balanced price in order to be sustainable?
Thank you, Stephen. I think, how are we doing on time? Timekeepers? We're okay. I think we have time for questions. One or two more? Yes, the gentleman in front. Microphone, yes.
Thank you very much, facilitator. I think we should go back to Ismail's proposal. I'm speaking here as the chair of directors of national libraries of the world. And every national library in every country has got a legal deposit regime. And almost every country now is bringing the electronic legal deposit part of it. And at the Conference of Directors of National Libraries, we assigned the British Library, Andy Stephen is here, to do a survey of all national libraries of the world. The idea being that we must collect the material electronically. By collecting that material, we make it easily accessible to our respective nations and to the whole world, because it is in line with the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, Article 32, that access to information is a human right. And I think I appreciate that sentiment, that publishers in respective countries, publishers associations, and the international publishers associations really look at themselves as strategic partners, especially with national libraries, because by collecting your material, we make it known, and in that way, we make you publicized throughout the whole world. So the change of regime is something that you have to look at very closely. Because at the Conference of Directors of National Libraries, our vision is in the future to form a global digital national library, that anywhere you can press a button and get material from everywhere else in the world. I think that's the challenge that our colleagues from the publishing sector and the national libraries of the world can play a significant role. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any closing comments? I think that would be our last question about this grand vision of a global national library. Any thoughts? Any coda to add to this discussion? Well, I'd like to thank all four gentlemen for a very lively discussion, for their insights into the future of the book. I think there is a future. We're not sure what it is, and I think clearly the industry is in a state of flux. But I think this session has thrown up a lot of interesting questions, a lot of interesting insights, and the participation from the very lively participation from the floor certainly has added to that as well. So I hope you join me to thank all four gentlemen for today's session, second panel. Thank you.